white supremacy? Charles?
To me, white supremacy is some, I don't want to say all, some Caucasians tend to believe that they, how should I say this? Because I want to be correct as I do this. Um, they're better than others, can do what they want to do. Um, Sometimes, we feel like, from a personal perspective, as far as white supremacy, uh, that we come second, and we will always come second or below um, people of the Caucasian race. Uh, I think that needs to change, but I'll slow down before we go too far.
Okay. Okay. Somebody want to chime in on what Charles just said? Elliot?
I think white supremacy is black inferiority. Like, if you take white supremacy, being a black man, I don't believe in white supremacy. I'm not saying that it's not white supremacy, but I'm saying the way I look at life and how I am, I look up to no one. So in order for white supremacy to have power, I have to give it to it.
Now, Ellie, I'm gonna put my glasses on right here because you talking my kind of language right there. All right, so now you're saying that for you, the only way there to be white supremacy is if there's black inferiority. Am I hearing you right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Terrence, I know you got something on that one.
Yeah, and I'm not at all disagreeing with, well, I can't disagree with what Elliot said. Although I guess my reaction to the question is, it's a systematic structure, a power structure that exists in this country, and it also it exists in this world, and it's really, to me, designed to, it's like it's a mechanism for self preservation of the white race. And the reason why I say that is, and I became knowledgeable of this less than maybe a month ago, I always question, why are black people so hated by white people? I remember James Baldwin made this statement, and it just always stayed with me. He asked a question in an interview, why is it that white people had to create something called a nigger? And that just resonated with me. What is it about them and their nature to make them have to create something called a nigger? He said, because I'm not a nigger. And I'm not a nigger, but it was something in their psyche that made white people, and which to me is the underpinning of white supremacy, it made them have to create something called a nigger. And so I think there's a structure that exists in the United States of America, and it exists in the world, and it exists so that the white race will not be annihilated. And black melanin is a dominant gene, and that's why I think they tried to not have the mixing of the races, because if they are to have the mixing of the races, and there's studies that show there's a certain date in which white will be wiped off the face of the earth, literally.
Okay. Okay. Charles, I know you probably got to come back to that you want to add.
I'm listening.
I want to ask you, when I ask Terrence a question.
Okay.
What if white people didn't create niggas?
What if they didn't?
What if somebody told you that they didn't create it?
Well, we know they did, right?
No. What I'm asking is, what if you or someone told you, or you read or found out that they didn't create the word nigger? Like, what if they didn't create it? But we've been told they created it, and we gave it the power that they use. You feel what I'm saying?
I can follow what you're saying, but I guess I know history too well to.
So where did the word originate?
Well, I just know historically they used that term. White people did during slavery. I'm talking
I'm talking before slavery, though. The word was around before slavery.
I don't remember. So the word, people were being called nigger before.
I mean, it originated from somewhere. The word came from another word. You see what I'm saying? I'm not like going at you.
No,
I'm just
no,
trying to go.
I don't feel like you are. I think
I'm trying to go past. Like it had to come from somewhere.
I think the
You
origin.
get what I'm saying?
The origin has to do with black, right? And because those who came to this country as slaves were black, they were labeled a term that that was they just made a negative term, because Niger is in Africa, right?
I don't know. I'm a college dropout.
Niger, yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. I don't know.
Well, Niger is in Africa, right? Well, I'm telling you, it's in Africa. That's the closest word that I know of that's related to nigger. And so,
I thought it came from Indians.
huh?
I thought it came from Indians.
Okay, we don't really have to battle over where the word came from, because I think the point, if I'm reading you wrong, Elliot, you can definitely correct me. But I think what you're saying is there has not really, we haven't really, the fact that we don't know for sure where that word comes from, and all of the meaning that we give to that word comes from what we think white people meant by the word to us, right? We've allowed them to dictate the power or the negative energy of that word, when in actuality, that word could have originated from somewhere that had,
was positive. It could have been positive.
It could have been positive originally before they.
Right. That's all I was trying to say right there. Like, it could have been positive in the past. And in order to deal with slavery, we got to go before slavery and come back into slavery. Because slavery came, somebody sit down somewhere and say, hey, let's start slavery. So in order to understand slavery and racism, we got to go before. In order to understand the Bible, we got to go before the Bible. You can't explain the Bible with the Bible. When I was in high school, we write a term paper, we had to have our references. You see what I'm saying? So in order to talk to me about these topics, we got to go before and come back to it, because I'm willing to learn. I may learn something. I'm always looking to learn, but we can't start with that. That's it. I think you got.
So I think what he's saying is and I think it's part of our sort of our training as being Black in America, right? Because I know for me, it wasn't but a couple of years ago that I learned that the term white was a legislated term, right? I just grew up believing that was like what people were, white, not realizing that they created legislation to call themselves, they legislated themselves to be white. And what gave white power is that the legislation gave people who are from the European area the label white with rights that people who are from African descent in America couldn't have. So, they couldn't, so if a person was white, let's say they could go to the store, but if you were Black, you couldn't go to the store. Or if you were white, you could get married, but if you were Black, you could not get married. Or you're from Africa, you could not get married. Because they really was more so, it was slave and African and that type of deal. So, so it was just a few years ago that I learned that about white, right? Prior to that, all of my understanding of white came from what, I was told without kind of going back and saying, okay, well, where did this term come from? Did you just come out the womb and, you white? No, somebody gave that term. And so white supremacy, I think what Elliot is saying is that with white supremacy, right, maybe white supremacy doesn't even actually have life, but only to the extent that we believe in ourselves to be Black inferior. Is that what you're saying, Elliot, to a certain extent?
To a certain extent, but we could be not saying that we're doing that on purpose.
Sometimes I don't think we're doing none of it on purpose.
Right. Sometimes we do things and we walk a certain way, and at some point you got to turn the lights on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what I was saying. Like, and like I say, Terrence, I wasn't going at you. I was just saying like we can't say I know history or I know this and then cut all our communication off and can't nobody tell us nothing. You know what I mean? We got to listen to each other, and it's just like working out. Like you got to keep on exercising, you know, your mind. You know what I mean? So like we learn, we got to detox. We got to detox all this history we learned in high school, all this history we read in these people papers and stuff like that. We got to detox that and then refill on our own research.
I totally agree.
Like we take DNA tests and mail it off and wait on them to send it back to us to tell us where we come from. Is that, you know what I mean? Like we got to detox from this whole life that we live.
Gotcha.
Until we do that.
Okay. I got you. Let's move forward, because I think this feeds into the next question, especially Elliot, the way you answered this question, because my next question is, do we as Black people contribute to the continuation of what we call white supremacy in the American system by our beliefs, by our feelings, by our thoughts, by our actions, and by our reactions? Charles, I'm gonna let you start there, because I think I know you.
Yeah.
Go ahead on, get with me.
I think we do kind of give into the ideology of white supremacy. Basically, like, because of how we do act in our communities. We've been brought up and we've been taught the history of America. And that history always puts us in a negative light. We've always been servants. We've always been treated unfairly. We've always been dehumanized. And you match that with being a very, very small population in this country. Yes, it does play into the idea of white supremacy, especially given the way throughout history we've had to fight and struggle for equality. So yes, we do play into it, and mainly because we still have not learned, and I hate to use the word unity, but we still haven't learned to put past personal issues or put aside personal feelings and remember what the common goal should be. I really think once we understand that how to work with our brothers and sisters, no matter what your political belief, no matter what your religious background is, if we could kind of focus more on an end game, an end goal that is a benefit to all of people of African descent in this country, then we won't be given so much into white supremacy. And that's just my thought.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I like the fact that when you said unity, you kind of backed it away, because I think sometimes, because I want unity too, but not in a sense that I want this perpetuation that we're all supposed to think the same.
Well, that's just it. We can't think the same. Nobody's going to think exactly the same. But being able to just put aside differences for the common goal.
And to add that, they don't even think the same. But what they have done very strategically, which I want to walk, the reason why I had these questions, I wrote out these questions because I want to walk out a proof of that we have sort of built our thinking, they built our thinking for us, I guess is what I'm saying, because they literally created a system of Democrat, Republican, right? Conservative, liberal. And I think what happened over time, now this is just me theorizing now, is that when you think about America and how America was formed, right? America was formed from European servants, okay? People who were in Europe who were low class, considered in the European world, right? They were low class. They came to America. They were dictated and controlled by the crown, okay? And they no longer wanted to be controlled. They no longer wanted to be told what to do. They were in this free land. They were very, very far away from Europe, and they got power hungry, right? They wanted to have authority in their own space, right? And so what happened is when they decided that they wanted to have what's now called America, they knew that they had to detach from Europe. Okay, so they detached from Europe by, of course, having having a rebellion, having a war, etc. All right, but then what happened is they forgot that they were servants, right? And they now had the power, and now they needed to, it's literally like they had the power, but they needed to create what they used to be. Okay, they created what they used to be by creating the white class, that using that label, right? And of course, they had African slaves. So a lot of people don't know is that white people were actually servants, right? They were indentured servants. Indentured servants and slaves pretty much were almost exact in the way they were treated in the colonial times, until they started to create these laws that gave white people's rights and didn't give them to people that were not white. At one point in time, even people who were Irish were considered trash in their eyes, right? And a lot of times people don't realize that. Now, if you see an Irish now, they may say they're Irish, but they're going to go by white, right? Because it gave them a choice. Come to America. You could take on the label white. We'll forget that in Europe, you were the low class. But if you take on the label white, you'll at least be bigger and better than these African slaves, right?
Let me interject here once.
Okay.
There's a gentleman that on my Facebook, and he speaks about his family's history, the family heritage of being Irish, and these are the exact same things that he shared openly, on Facebook, and we've discussed it or whatever. And yes, because he is a Caucasian male, he does, just follows long suit into that category that we're discussing as far as white supremacy. And I don't believe he is what he appears on the outside, because I've actually spoken to the gentleman, but because we have actually talked about some things in private. But yes, the history is somewhat similar.
Charles.
Yes.
Now that you say that, tomorrow I got a cousin that live here. He's going back to Natchez because the Rice family, we connected to an Irish family over there, and they sent the family creed. So he's actually driving it down tomorrow to pick it up, to bring it back so we can look at it. It's just a coincidence it came up.
Mm-hmm. Well, given the history in this country, you know how we intermarry and intermingle. That's not out of the norm. I mean, because I'm quite sure if we go back in history, we'll find out that we all have somewhere that we have some Caucasian lineage that took off somewhere, as well as Native American. So that's not unheard of.
Yeah. Absolutely. Terrence, do you want to dive into whether we as Black people perpetuate white supremacy?
I actually think we do to a certain extent. I think some of it will exist whether or not we perpetuate it or not. I think it's just a system that's been created in this country that us thinking about it or contributing to it, it doesn't matter. It's going to still exist. But I think to a certain extent, the impact that it has on us, we have total control of that, I believe.
Okay.
Back to something you were saying earlier, Charles, I think what allows it to really perpetuate itself more so in our community and how it impacts us, I think the way and how it's so damaging is because we don't tend to focus on the common good. We don't it's the division that exists within community that allows it to kind of have the kind of impact that it does. I think if we were more, because we're stronger together, the stronger we are, the less impact I think it would have on us.